welcome to our show, The Ice Cream Parlor, where we cool down today's hot debates. Today's chilling stories from the perspective of the main players of the Cold War, and their views on the war on terror today. To refresh, the Cold War occurred from 1947 to 1991, mainly between the Soviet Union and the United States, but it involved many other nations because it was fought through proxy wars. The main cause of the Cold War was the disagreement between the Big Three over the reconstruction of Eastern Europe post-World War II. This Cold War conflict has carried over into today and manifested itself into the war on terror because we provided many terrorist groups with arms during the Cold War, and now they're using them on the United States. So now I have President Truman and President Eisenhower. So Truman, give me a summary of what happened, of what triggered your actions during the Cold War and how you handle communism.
Okay, well, my great dear friend George Marshall created the Marshall Plan because post-World War II, nations needed financial help for reconstruction, and the U.S. needed to aid the European nations quickly to keep them from Soviet influence. And so this is why I instilled the Marshall Plan, and this allowed nations to get help to write off threats of terrorism in the form of communism.
And Eisenhower, how do you and Truman differ on your foreign policies?
See, the Truman Doctrine had helped Turkey and Greece economically, but Truman's methods were necessary during his time in Reconstruction, but once I was in office, it was no longer really needed. There was no more time to just indirectly aid nations. We needed to stop the red tide. See, when I was a boy, they were about to amputate my leg, and I refused. If I could stop them, I wasn't about to let these hooligan Soviets take over countries and just watch them fall like dominoes. So I instigated the Eisenhower Doctrine, which provided not only economic help, but also aid from U.S. military forces if they request help and are trying to fight against communism.
So question to both of you, how would you handle the war on terror today?
We see, today, you need to get rid of people like MacArthur who are in your government and military. Douglas was fighting for containment, and he was doing a mighty fine job of it too, until he was too quick to jump to the aggressor fighting tactics. And he wanted to nuke China. I had to get rid of him. But this shows that today Americans should embrace the idea of brinkmanship. Push the terrorists to the brink of war and try to get them to shoot first so that we have a more defensive role instead of the offensive role. And then there's also people like Chiang Kai-shek, who was a Chinese Nationalist Party leader, and he was against democracy. He used American and Soviet help, and he never chose sides. So you need to get rid of people like him who are your allies but are also for your enemy.
See, going off of that, it scares me that there are so many Middle Eastern countries affiliated with terrorism today. You know how it goes. Once a couple fall in, there's no going back. It's like a set of dominoes. That was precisely the domino theory. And we had to stop countries from falling before it was too late, and you guys need to be doing the same.
Thank you. Thank you. I would now like to welcome Mr. Joseph McCarthy. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Please, tell the audience how you ensured communism did not spread to the United States of America.
You know, communism is the greatest evil of the day. It's like a contagious infection. All traces of the virus must be eliminated from the U.S. by any means necessary, or else the U.S. will be plagued with the same contagion as the Soviet Union. But you may be asking, how can the government possibly be aware of communist sympathies in individuals?
Right.
No, my answer to this was very simple. It's called the HUAC, which is the House on Un-American Activities. And the HUAC was responsible for the spread of communist propaganda, information. And it's also responsible for investigating communist sympathies on a more local scale as well. So the HUAC's greatest effect was fear, which motivated people to be as uncommunist as possible. Fear is a great motivator, which is why we made examples of a few choice people, as their media covered punishment acted as a deterrent for anyone interested in communism. Poor Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, their execution was a very sad day. But that's what you get for spreading CIA secrets to the communists.
True that. So how would you deal with the war on terror today?
Well, frankly, I just stick to the blacklist. And what I did was I just took a bunch of names, random names, put them on a list, sat back and watched the people turn each other in, So you just take a bunch of names, put them on a list, and pretend you've uncovered all the terrorist secrets. It's a pretty major bluff, but it's how you're going to get people to weed each other out so that they do your job for you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Joseph Stalin. So, please tell us, how were your relations with other nations during the Cold War?
You know, relations with other countries, they were somewhat strained. Events like the Americans putting nuclear weapons in Turkey and our response in Cuba has really made the Soviet Union appear the bad guy. You know, but all we really want to do is spread the gift of communism across the world. And the only people that really stand in our way is NATO. After the events in Korea and the treachery with the UN Security Council, we've really grown distant. And, you know, we've kind of just taken shelter behind our Iron Curtain. Personally, I think we're being very friendly, and I think the United States and Soviet Union can be good allies. We both love taking over third world countries and then installing our own governments. I mean, look at what my buddy Mao did in Korea. But in reality, our differences really just make us impossible to be allies. We're communists, they're capitalists, and they really just think they can do whatever they want. You know, the KGB does some sketchy stuff, but the CIA literally brings about the doom of other countries. You know, the Warsaw Pact was just created to protect ourselves from the NATO threat. And, you know, one day they could come pouring over the Berlin Wall. I mean, we tried to push them west, but that stupid airlift, you know, just stopped everything. You know, if only Khrushchev had not gotten rid of my policies, we might have won the Cold War.
Yes, and so how would you deal with nations in the Middle East today?
You know, I believe the best way to deal with a country that has a terrorist problem is just to, you know, segregate the entire country with giant walls and, you know, individually purge each country of a terrorist threat with outstanding military force.
You know, I just have to say, this is the worst idea I've ever heard. I'm Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England. And I think that aggression is probably the worst idea for the situation. Because if you attack terrorists with aggression, then you know that they're just going to attack right back. And in this day where we have nuclear weapons, that could lead to World War III, which could definitely lead to the mass destruction of the world.
Okay, Churchill, I have to ask, why did you come barge in here? Why didn't you just wait for your segment?
I just really hate Stalin, you know? Like, we had a decent relationship at first, but it all went south at Yalta Conference when we agreed that Poland would have democratic elections, and then he stabbed us in the back and installed a communist government in Poland. And I thought that was a really stupid thing to do.
Well, I think you're stupid.
I think you're a stupid
fat.
fat.
You are such a bad leader.
Person I know.
Eat your ice cream, Stalin. Okay, so while you're here, Churchill, how would you deal on the war on terrorism today?
You know, you just have to contain the terrorists. Like, Stalin's wall idea is pretty on point, except you're completely destroying the population.
Maybe the population deserves to be destroyed.
The population
ever think about that?
Well, that's all the time we have for
maybe
today.
you're
Tune in next week.
You're an alcoholic.
Justin Bieber's
You are an
proposed
alcoholic. How's that
deportation back to Canada.
Drugs are
See
bad.
ya.